Yes, I'm going to be doing a video on what exactly makes up the mindset of a cyberbully. Now, this video is going to be focused in particular on a few cyberbullies or predators, whatever you want to call them, that I personally have experienced in this little troll circle that I've been in for several years now. And some of you viewers, which is a few, but I'm only targeting the ones in particular that this video is going to be focused on. Now, some of these cyberbullies goes way beyond what a general cyberbully would be described as. I mean, these people go to the extremes. They commit the most heinous and unspeakable acts towards their victims. But you know, there is a lot of information out there that's dedicated to protecting our kids and even adults nowadays. And some of these bullies are adults. They're into their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s that I've seen. So what's so different about them that their social skills are so drastically different? It's easy to just lump these type of people into the bad eggs category. But the reality goes years back, all the way into a child's upbringing, through their formative years. Yes, even as early as in preschool. Psychologists have drawn that bullying behaviors starts early. It really does. Our formative years really shapes, to a certain degree, who we become when we become adults. And psychologists has drawn that bullying behaviors does start early indeed. And more research is showing that bullying behaviors are developed between toddler and preschool years. When we grow up during our formative years, it really shapes to a certain degree of what we become, who we are, how we perceive things, and how we treat others during our adult years, does it not? Kids are a product of their upbringing, and many parents, unknowing, expose them to interactions that shape the way their children will communicate with others one day. It shows that there is a link between disciplinary parenting styles that use threats and spanking to control behavior in the children, that in turn use the same methods to get their peers to cooperate with them. Interestingly, though, it appears that most bullies lack personal awareness and are completely unaware of how they are perceived. Often they find ways to justify their behavior and have no concept of how their peers actually see them. For the most part, they consider themselves well-liked, though this is usually just a result of fear-based manipulation. People being too afraid to speak up. And I find that to be very true. I've had PMs from several people that they're too afraid to speak up on the threads. And the ones that are commenting are generally the cyberbullies themselves. Sometimes in groups or larger gangs. And that's how a lot of them like to operate, because they feel safe and empowered when their fellow friends or cohorts, internet contacts, wherever you want to describe them as, are with them, backing them up. Because all too often you will not see a rogue cyberbully acting on his own accord, because really, deep down inside, they are weak. They are mentally afraid of the real society. And we're talking about, in particular, the cyberbullying. For the most part, they consider themselves well-liked. As I mentioned before, though this is usually just a result of fear-based manipulation and people being too afraid to speak up. They also have low self-esteem. Bullies are made, not born. And as I said before, this behavior is typically fostered at a very young age, which, coupled with aggressive behavior, can create a child who not only lacks communication skills, but feels the need to defend themselves constantly. And I've experienced that by reading their comments. And I can kind of relate to that. That does sound very familiar. More in particular, Katie. Yes, Katie will create a valid justification to defend herself. That sounds very familiar, but we'll get into that a little bit more. This is going to be probably a two-part series, this being the first. It's due to this, though, that so many cyberbullies are unable to make peace with what they do. They see threats and insults everywhere they look in their minds and in their eyes. Everyone else is asking for it in their mind. They lash out as a defense mechanism and then often seek out weaker victims to bolster their own sense of superiority. Isn't that true? They need to feel in charge of someone. This lack of self-esteem can also foster a need to be in control of something. If they had a tumultuous upbringing with a lot of big changes that were completely out of control, they might lash out and assert their dominance over others as a means of coping. So as we can see, as we speak more about this, and this information is based off of a psychiatrist, we can see that this really is, obviously, a mental health issue with a lot of these cyberbullies, cyber predators. Major changes and volatile circumstances can make a child feel vulnerable, and if the ability to be aggressive is there, they turn to others to victimize in an effort to protect themselves. By having a say in someone else's day, it helps them to cope with not having a say in their own. The trouble is, bullying behavior is something that is developed over years and years of difficult circumstances, and indeed, there may be no rehabilitating a bully. Yes, I've often witnessed that myself. Some of these people, it's almost like sometimes you think they try, but they revert right back to their old lifestyle of intimidation, harassing, abusing other people online in the comfort of their own home, where it's easy and there's no repercussions, there's no retaliation, you see. They sit in the safety of their private home. However, one key point that's worth mentioning is the power of suggestion. In many instances, people tend to become what society perceives them as. So we can see a little bit of insight here on the makeup of a cyberbully from childhood when they grow on to adulthood and exhibit some of these behaviors and thinking. We can understand a little bit of what possibly went on through their childhood. A dysfunctional childhood, if you will. So I'm just going to cut it off here, and I'm going to get into the more specific, particular people I have in mind. And you probably know of a few that I'll probably mention. But we'll get into that in part 2.